Okay, our group of two went uh, deep in trying to extract some analytical understanding of those presentations. So I don't have too much time, so I'm gonna give you a quick summary on the presentations for those who were not there, and then I'll try to expend much of the time working in the analysis. Okay, so the three presentations was about the two strategies. So the first one was about a modeling exercise to support conservation and developing decision making. The second one was about articulation, indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge for conservation and development. And the third one was about scenario planning, stakeholder development analysis, and future concepts. So I didn't put all the names here, but just to make it clear, clean. So for those of you who already saw it, sorry, but the idea is that we have some challenges about the climate change, global demand for food and natural resources, and also the economic development of infrastructure, which is from 2000 on started to be on the main top of the Brazilian and other agendas in South America regarding IRSA and other cooperation acts. And what this shows us is that we have two possible futures for the Amazon. The first one is the development of the Amazon will succeed, but the second one, it will be inhibited by the cumulative and synergistic impacts of this development that it's supposed not be seen as a broad subject. So the lessons learned was about that, of course, roads are the major direct and indirect drivers of deforestation. Global climate and deforestation affect regional climate and also reduce precipitation discharge, impacting hydropower generation. And despite those important findings, results are rarely communicated to decision making and turn it into action. So some of the gaps regarding the approach, there are some inadequate treatments on infrastructure roles as a driver. Also in human systems, the spatial economic and industrialization issues, and also those modelings are not considering exogenous factors and cumulative and synergistic impacts. And also there are some gaps in dissemination, often not translated into local stakeholders' use, and also not involved in, often are misrepresented in modeling development. The second panel, articulating indigenous and scientific knowledge. There is an assumption that many areas usually considered natural are in fact anthropogenic. The transition from ecological hotspots to socio-ecological hotspots, that was a concept brought in the presentations, that we need to use this ethno-environmental corridors of protected areas of indigenous lands as a hotspots. And of course, in terms of ethno-management plans, then trying to think differently in the conceptions of how to articulate knowledge. And also it brings the concept or the idea of epistemic justice, considering that different sources or systems of knowledge should be actually considered in the same way. And some lessons learned is that indigenous knowledge is being used to demand rights, as the case, for instance, the Raposa Serra do Sol in Roraima, indigenous land. and others. And also, more than half of protected areas of Brazilian Amazon are indigenous lands and territories. It makes sense that science should dialogue indigenous way of knowing the Amazon. So it's like a huge knowledge that you are not considering in science, Western science. So most of the gaps also is about recognizing indigenous rights and lands, and also not because of their knowledge about the place, but also for ethical and moral reasons. And the last presentation group was about scenario planning, and they recognize that stakeholders uh, driven tool of future scenario planning, it's a way of overcoming this sectoral science approach, so to guide some answering for wicked problems, and also must be possible and consistent, and also involve people who are affected by it, so the locals. And they also recognize it's a social learning process. So modeling is like a way of democratize the thinking about science, and also engaging stakeholders in a decision uh, in a future scenario for decisions. So the lessons learned is that gamification of this scenario planning is useful because make people more comfortable in participating. Needs also some expertise in facilitating those scenario planning exercise, and also provide information to think what matters most for the collective, and also what future may look like and actions that should we take. Some gaps of this approach or tool is about that it provide uncertainties to decision making, because they often don't have a simple answer, and also it's hard then to broke this down into the various stakeholders in like practical actions for them to pursue or to implement. And also it's considered like a soft method, so some criticism of scientific uh, epistemological approaches, and also could be very money intensive. So some preliminary convergence that appeared. Uh, I won't repeat all of it, but some of the main gaps raised was about communication, connections, also in terms of scales, and also involvement of powerful stakeholders, and some idea of how these limitations could be superseded is about translating scenario into business logics, but also in other logics, integrating processes through several stakeholders uh, from the region that is affected by it. And also, when you have an idea on where or when it will happen, we are in a better position to anticipate measures. So this is what happened in the, the TCD workshop, and then we are trying to do analysis about it, considering the socio-ecological system framework, and also trying to translate those inputs, gaps, and lessons learned into a theory of change, and trying to address it to how to reorganize systems towards desirable changes. So I'm not gonna get too much in detail here. So just to see some of the publications, the current ones about socio-ecological systems frameworks and the theory of change. And in the socio-ecological systems, we have this four main units, which is the environment, the resource systems, the actors, and the governance systems. They are very intertwined with all that's happening in a certain or particular location. Uh, just the idea to have here is where the flux is going. We have this governance system with the roles and the actors that could be either governmental agencies or no government or private sectors, so on. And also having a sense of scales or what are the resources or the environmental actors and the government systems in different scales. Of course, these are like social constructed scales, just an idea. Of course, you could have much more scales on that, but this is just the idea on summarizing the main actors and governance and what scales they are happening so far. And DDA says about what is the immediate result, the intermediate, and the ultimate result. So it's very in line with other theory of changes. So we have to empower, engage stakeholders, amplify, enhance communication of science to society. It is create this shared vision, and also change vision of powerful stakeholders, create shared vision again in permanent forums, and also so looking for this ultimate result about rights, diversity, and conditions to support life. And much what was discussed in the workshop, and also well, as you see the theory of changes and the socio-ecological systems kind of converge to those ideas. So it was not difficult to explore that. So first I'm going to present some general findings of our panel, which is we felt that discussion was much focused on the scientific perspective rather than involving other actors and tools and strategies. So the discourse was focused also more in conservation than development. They didn't talk too much about what kind of development we want, where to want to go to. So we took that as a taken idea of development. And also there was a common sense in this panel that science practice so far has not been efficient to generating decision-making outcomes. Besides some few examples, the general sense is that. And to supersede that, sorry for the spelling here, we came up with broadly two ideas: include diverse stakeholders into a continuous social learning process as much as you can in several arenas, and also need more interdisciplinary network and a polyscalar approach of monitoring, modeling, planning to really influence decision making, mostly focusing on them in the political settings. So going into depth in this, so the first topic I presented in the last preliminary presentation. So we have to bridge this gap between scientific knowledge and political decision making. How? Science have to incorporate all the other views and knowledge to these learning processes of scenario planning and modeling. So indigenous, traditional, local, juridical, etc. So we have to engage those stakeholders into science practices, and at the same time, science also has to be more aware or make a bigger effort to translate those outcomes into a language that other actors could make use of it. So this idea is performing more spaces of social learning to build a shared vision, to build bonds, and also to build then to generate empowerment. But there is this case of uneven empowerment. If you put all the stakeholders, let's say a private sector, a company, and indigenous let's say. Probably the private sector, they are more organized. They already have more political and economic power. So we are sharing a vision, empowering all of them, but at the same time, the minorities, let's say indigenous, traditionals, and grassroots organizations, don't translate that into action. As the time we are like empowering more who has the power already than not. So we might have more focus on capacity building and advocacy for those marginalized groups. And the second idea here is trying to integrate and approach in a way of like a multi or poly-scalar approach for this kind of tools and strategies in science. We have to recognize that global economy development is affecting a lot those localities or places, spaces, and all the lives of people are living there through economic and infrastructure policies. We must integrate this knowledge to account for those synergistic impacts and the future scenarios. So it was too much talk about the environmental impact assessments. They are localized. They don't capture all these synergistic effects. So we should think in strategic scenario planning, strategic monitoring so far. And also we should be aware of policy windows for this agenda setting, and also count on possible allies being the power elites. But I would say that power elites will never ally with conservation most of the time, so it's hard to find some power elites that would help us in this project. And also, so we kind of thinking that change regimes for sustainable futures probably we should build on coalitions, and also this idea of assemblies. Sometimes like coalitions, they share people who are sharing the same beliefs, but assemblies is more like we have some common interests, but we are not having the same beliefs, but we can assemble together to work for something. Let's say this idea of land sparing that Thaler proposed, private sector with government trying to increasing land sparing and agricultural intensification in the Amazon. So the idea is looking for increasing advocacy at national scales. So advocacy and this empower, this grassroots organization are sometimes dealing just in local scales, but they have to integrate themselves in a higher scale, let's say state or regional scale, trying to reach this national level where those policies are happening and could make difference. So of course we could use some tactics for this, like massive messaging, media influence, and also defunding the innovations so far on this. So that's the end. The idea here is this author here proposed like 6 theories of change and also 4 tactics of change. And we choose this one, which is coalition theory of change, but we would like try to adapt that coalition and our assemblies too. So we have the action part here, the strategies, and we've seen that modeling is trying to coordinating, collaborating others in similar policy beliefs or not, but at least by putting them all together. Also, this support of individuals in the same core is kind of empowering stakeholders, building some consensus among social actors, and again empowering stakeholders through advocacy and other initiatives. And we could like share a vision of the future, maybe not changing beliefs, I don't know, And so really drives to outcomes, to change, increase awareness, change beliefs and values, and strengthening alliances and bases of support. So here, communication plays a big role, but also in all of it is communication involved. So I think this is the idea so far. Danielle is looking there. So I don't know, Danielle, if you would like to complement in something, complement.
No, I think that's good. That's what we discussed, and seeing it again, it seems better than I imagined. Actually, like no, for real. We discussed the presentation, and now hearing you, things seem more clear. But well, I was in the process, so I want to know what people think, and I would like to thank for the opportunity of seeing that. And we will mute my microphone again now.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, and thank you all. I think this is like still a preliminary analysis, so we are counting on your feedback and see how it can be improved and clarified. Thank you very much.